Good Wednesday to you, everybody in gov/com or com/gov, whatever you like. 604. Welcome to week boom 3. How's everybody doing? Did you enjoy the Memorial Day weekend? I hope you did. Let's get this video started correctly. A little afternoon espresso. Much better. I am here again, your now sufficiently caffeinated communication instructor, to go over with you what we're going to be doing this week and what we did last weekend. A couple of things to keep your little eyes on, okay? All right, for this week, you see in the module, okay, we're going to be reading chapters 13 to 18 in PIP, and chapters 11 to 12 in MAP, that is Mass Media and American Politics, and then PIP, Media, Power in Politics. Okay, if you have not turned in your first film review, make sure that that is done. In fact, you need to reach out to me because we're now, 2 days past view? That was due on the 26th. I think I had a typo there for just a teeny weeny bit. I think I said it was due on the 20th, but it's not. It was the 26th, which is a couple of days ago. I will attend to those, that is the grading there of this week, okay, and give you some feedback, and then towards the end of this week, beginning of next, I'll post the next link for the next film review. And by the way, if you want to watch them in advance, maybe sometimes you look at a film twice, you get more out of it. There are some films on this list that I have watched lots. It's like it's not unlike, say, a painting or a piece of music that's well done, okay, that you can look at it or listen to it again and again and appreciate something that you came to understand, or understand something, come to appreciate something that you hadn't noticed before. All right. So I hope that there's enough here by way of subject matter backdrop. I mean, thematically, we're all trying to stay in that triangulation between the relationship between media, public, and power. Okay. But how that's expressed, I hope that you'll find enough here to keep you interested. So I will give you some feedback and then help you get set for review number 2. Okay. Let's take a look at what you did last week. I'm just going to hop around these questions a little bit. Now, remember, everything from the discussions is fair game for the final exam. I'm not going to pull material from the film reviews for the final exam because, I don't assume that everybody's watched all of them. I will, however, not a lot, but a few questions will be pulled from the videos. All right. So make sure that you're attentive to all of them as well, which, is almost self-referential or self-fulfilling, I suppose, because if you're not watching this video, you're not going to get the message to be attentive. And then how would you know to be attentive? You see what I mean? It's chicken and egg. It bends the mind. Okay, let's take a look at the questions, see what you said. By the way, when you're answering the questions and you list them, please use the numbers that are listed next to the question. So of the 3 that you want to pick, if you wanted to pick number 2, 3, and 7, then do that. Type 2, 3, and 7. Don't start with 1, 2, 3, because then that doesn't match to the numbers above. It makes it hard for me to run down your answers to which question you're answering, and it may make it hard for your classmates to do the same. Okay, question number 1, according to a study done by Page et al., and that's chapter 7 in PIP, what type of news reporting moves public opinion the most? All right, let's see. Jacelyn Porter, and again, if I pronounce anybody's name wrong, please reach out to me and let me know. According to study done by Page et al., what type of news reporting moves the most? According to the study, news commentary has the strongest impact and moves public opinion the most. Correct. And that goes way back. Now, this is something that has become a topic of discussion because of its sometimes problematic nature. And what I mean by topic of discussion and it is commentary as news. It has not always been clearly defined in American media. What is commentary and what is the news, in the sense that we say news or reporting of fact? Okay, that's a myth. If you take a meander back through the papers of the 1800s, holy cow, do you find opinion passed off as fact? In fact, so much so that what you don't find, it's harder to find statements in print that this is the opinion of the paper, the editor, the author. That's rarer than this is what it was. This is what happens. Things change in the 1900s and, begin to separate by the mid 1900s, and papers adopt a format in which there is a sort of a strict separation. There is opinion, and it's actually placed in its own section in the paper. All right, it's called opinion editorial, or shortened as op-ed, and then there's news. Okay, interestingly, part of that split, that bifurcation is the word that's used, all right, to break into two parts. Part of that bifurcation comes as U.S. reporters, first in newsprint and then in radio, are stationed throughout Europe in the run-up to the Second World War. And those that wanted to get their stories out, one of them, two really notable ones, Edward R. Murrow and William Shirer, 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 to get their stories out about the political tensions building up in Europe and then the war. They could not editorialize without having their stories killed by the countries that they were reporting on, and notably countries like Germany and Spain, and then fascist France or the Soviet Union. And so they had to develop a split in which, they could report the facts, like this is exactly happening, but report it in such a way that readers in the United States would go, oh yeah, and that's a bad thing, yeah, without saying, and Hitler says that he doesn't want war, just, to hearken to reports that Murrow or Shirer would have filed. Hitler says he doesn't want war, but my opinion, it's clear that he does, and he's not telling the truth. That report would never be allowed out through the European censors of countries controlled by Germany. They just wouldn't let him file it. And if he did file it, and without going through the censors, they would track him down and either throw him out of the country or throw him in prison. There were reporters that were subject to that. So as a consequence, they had to split them out. Okay, then came cable television. And in a 24-hour news cycle, channels, companies needed content. And one of the easiest and lowest hanging, and in many ways least informative types of content is opinion. Because you can have, talking heads, as they're sometimes referred to pejoratively, yammering on for hours about who knows what, whatever. You see this in sports, you see this in politics, you see this in consumable goods. I mean, think the HGTV, Home Garden Television, or the Home Shopping Network, in which they go on and on about this piece of jewelry or that, or I mean, you'll have a half an hour discussion of a mop, for crying out loud. This has driven the resurgence of opinion as news, and it moves people to do things. Now, not always the right thing or informed things or things that are in everyone's best interest, but it moves people to do things. And it shows no sign of slowing down. In fact, just the opposite, as the media landscape has gotten more crowded with the introduction of the internet and the content that is the World Wide Web, in which you just have independent news commentators that just pop up like mushrooms on a wet lawn to compete for and retain the audience that they need to drive their revenue models. Networks have gone one step further than op-ed, and that is op-ed aimed at a very specific demographic, whether that's ideologically, based on gender, based on race. And you can see this. I mean, if you take there are news services. One of them is called Ground. If you've never heard of this service, I'm just showing you the app. It looks like, when it opens, there we go. Ground News, looks like that. Okay. And their business model is they take stories from all over the place. They don't write the stories. They're just an aggregator site. They take stories from all over the place, analyze the point of origin, that is where it was written, and then list information about that point of origin that gives the reader an indication as to where on the political spectrum, from conservative to liberal to centrist, that organization leans. And you can, if you use this app, you can try it for free. Take the same story, open it from one of the set of sources that are identified by Ground as on the extreme side of the liberal political spectrum, and then the extreme side of the conservative political spectrum. It gives you a little bar, in terms of ideological strength, and see how differently the same story reads, what is and isn't emphasized. This is how platforms, both large media and independent media, just, Joe YouTube channel, are driving their revenue model. So it's not going anywhere. It's really at the heart of what's meant by fake news. All right. When the term fake news is used, it's not entirely, mostly used to signify something that's just been made up out of thin air. It's rather a term that denotes opinion presented as fact, which it's not. Now, you can have factually based opinions. That's fine. Okay. And because someone has an opinion, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not factual, but to put forward the one like the other is not accurate, and it's not good, but it isn't going anywhere. Okay, let's take a look at question number 2. Research done by Paul Gronk and Timothy Cook suggests that from 1970 to the 1990s, an increasing number of Americans do not trust the press. Briefly, yeah, you can see who hasn't had lunch. Summarize how they came to this conclusion, then answer the following question. If Gronk and Cook's findings are correct, does this trend hurt or help U.S. democracy? Which, by the way, is what I really wanted you to, to get at. John, let's take a look at you. The period of time, 1970s, characterized decline level of trust, explains the press was admired for some time, but later on, the public started to feel like the media were having too much influence, result in loss of trust. Media's source of information. One major factor affecting trust to the press is disinformation. Accusations affected audiences' trust in targeted news, while trust in the accusing actors remains largely unaffected. Okay, yes, true. Remember though that disinformation, that's a relatively new term, and we're talking about a study here from the 1970s and 1990s. What we're really looking at is politicization, that is, the focusing on certain ideological groups, okay, And therefore this ideological group doesn't trust the perspective, and as opinion begins to replace factual reporting, the trust goes down. By way of what is and what is not news, you raise an interesting point, John. Let me make you aware and suggest to you that most of what you read isn't news. And what do I mean by that? And I don't mean it's not opinion either. Okay. News, inherent in the definition, is information that is pertinent to you, the reader. So stories about national political events, widespread sociological trends, economic events and trends that are going to affect you, even in ways that maybe you don't understand. You know, you may look at news about the stock market and go, yeah, who cares? You know, only certain people in the stock market. Yeah, no. Whether it's your money that is directly out of your pocket or not, you, me, and everybody else, we're in the stock market. How so? You might ask. Well, if you live in a city, if you live in a county, if you live in a state, if you have a job in which there is something offered by way of retirement, you are in the stock market. Why? Because your city, county, state raises money by putting money in the stock market. Your retirement account projects its ability to pay you back what you put into it based on stock performance. So news is information that is pertinent to you. A lot of what you read, though, is not. Okay. Some story about an automobile accident in a distant state. Okay, there's nothing particularly unique about automobile accidents. They happen with tremendous regularity. And what say happens, and I'm just picking this state at random, what happens in Georgia by way of automobile accidents has absolutely no pertinence to you if you live in Texas or something of that sort. Okay. Someone mistreating their children in another state is not necessarily pertinent to you. Someone breeding dogs for fighting, and usually the news is of and the reason I'm sort of rattling off these bad things is that's because what the news tends to focus on. This isn't news. This is the mere moving of information from one place to another, swapping it with a label, calling it news, and presenting it to you. Now, it's an open question as to whether everybody involved understands what's going on. And I think, to be fair, because I've been in the media business for a long, long time, many of them do not. Some of them do. Because what's really involved is not the intent to inform you as a member of the citizenry. It is the intent to rile you emotionally as an individual. So you will click and you will stare and you will generate revenue for the platform. It's not news. It's the movement of information around with the intent not of providing you with pertinent information that you need, but rather unsettling you emotionally to provide revenue add that the platform needs. I don't think that's good, all right, for obvious reasons, but that's how it works. Okay, but then the pressing question that as people distrust the press is, does this hurt or help U.S. democracy? Richard, let's see what you have to say. Other reasons play a factor in our failures to report diverse stories, sensationalism of certain topics such as crime. This is why people don't trust it anymore. And again, and this is another one of those categories that may or may not be relevant to you. Crime on the New York subways, for instance. If you live in a state that doesn't have a subway, like most states, okay, not relevant to you. Okay. I mean, people pushing people in front of trains, terrible. I don't live in a place where there are any trains. I don't imagine that there's going to be a wave of people pushing people in front of trains that aren't here. Not relevant to me. Okay. Let's get back to you, Richard. Other reasons play a factor: story sensationalizing certain topics such as crime creation, partisan news networks. Although it's concerning, I don't believe that it'll hurt democracy, especially since there are partisan networks and newspapers. This will allow for opposing views, even if the media consumers will have to go to different sources to get the complete picture. Okay, that is an interesting question. That is, or a proposition, to go to the different sources to get the complete picture. And the question is, do they? Okay. The answer to that question is not as often as you would hope. In fact, most people get their news, way in the high double digits in terms of the majority, way above 50%, from single sources that they return to over and over and over again. And those sources, in turn, adjust what it is that they present and how it is that they present it to play to the bias of their viewers, which takes us back to the question of whether this is good or not for our democracy. Well, consider the root words for democracy. Democracy comes from two Greek words: demos, meaning the people, and kratos, K-R-A-T-O-S, meaning power, people power, power of the people. Okay. For democracy to function, there has to be, it's essential that there, besides the allowance of it functioning, it's essential that there are two things. Number one, there has to be a minimum threshold of an informed people. Because when you don't have an informed people, although, yes, you can have power expressed by the people, what you have is reactionary power and not informed decision making. Okay, so this isn't good for the function of government. You have to have an informed populace, and then you have to have some consensus about what constitutes informed. That is, what is true and what is not. And informed, not meaning, we understand, not simply meaning, oh, I know, but do you know what's actual, factual, and what is not? And I'm not going to answer this question for you, okay? But if you get the sense, you get the opinion that I'm hedging towards, I don't think this is a good thing, you'd be right, okay? Because as we become more and more fragmented, we in turn become less and less, one, informed, and two, agreeable as to what it means to be informed. Okay, question number 3. Let's see. Is Matthew A. Baum concerned about the increasing number of Americans who are informed by means of soft news? And this can be infotainment and this sort of thing. Okay. In answering this question, consider the introduction from Neil Postman's work, Amusing Ourselves to Death, Public Discourse in the Age of Show Business. I cannot recommend that work highly enough. All right. I mean, it was written back in the 80s, but thematically, Postman just, he absolutely nailed it. It is a classic work. If you want to understand how it is that information works in the public or doesn't work well, as the case may be according to Neil Postman, read that book. That is that's an essential. All right. Valerie. Matthew Baum expressed concern regarding the growing number of Americans who depend on soft news as entertainment and celebrity gossip for their information. He believes that this trend could have negative implications for the quality of news and consumption, overall civic engagement in society. Baum analyzed how soft news may minimize the obstacles to political engagement by rendering political content more appealing and entertaining. Exactly. Sometimes the vicissitudes, that is, the comings and goings, that it's necessary to A, understand, and then B, operate through, for C, a stable functioning government. Sometimes these things are boring. Line item budgets, voting regulations, a staffing of police departments. But if you're going to have a functional and stable community, you've got to put these things in place and put checks in place to make sure that they're working. And when they're not working, this is where we depend on the media to step in and say, hey, this is not working. Okay. So when we trivialize things, and you see this now in infotainment, okay, John Oliver stands out, or Jon Stewart stand out, and whose programs I watch. I mean, they're entertaining, and I like to laugh, but they're a poor substitute for news. Okay. And you ought to be aware of that. I'm not saying therefore you never ever look at them. That's not how it works. I'm like, oh, you looked at them and now you're tainted. No, but be aware of what it is you are, and most importantly, are not getting, okay, through them. Okay, question, excuse me. Question number, where are we now? Question number 4. What is meant by media frame? Okay, this one is really straightforward in frame adoption. And this you need to know just by, you know, there are things within the study of media that when somebody says, oh, you know, that's this and that's that, you need to just go, bam, I know what that is. Okay, so do I even want to find somebody? Okay, Nathaniel, what is meant by media framing? Okay, you know what? You just need to know that. Okay, we're going to skip that. Okay. What is meant by voluntary political inequality? You know, this is an interesting term to me that your authors would use. What are its origins in your opinion? Is it a real phenomenon? And if so, how is it impacting our democracy? Okay, because again, inherent in the term democracy, demos kratos, is the understanding that this cannot be coerced. That is, you can't force someone to participate, because as soon as you do, you're removing the power of the people in the exercise of power. Do you understand? I mean, if you have an election in which you have one candidate, and you can say, well, everybody has to vote, and you know, and this was common in 19th and early 20th century Europe. They would call them plebiscites. Do you want this candidate or do you not? Or do you want this head of state to do this or do you not? And they would force everyone to vote. Okay, by the mere fact that they were coerced to vote, that was intimidating. And people got the message. I mean, leaders didn't hold plebiscites to say, no, stop me before I seize more power. Just the opposite. And you get these crazy, you know, like 99% everybody saying yes. Okay. So I find this an interesting term. Heather, let's see what you have to say. Voluntary political inequality happens with the rise of internet, increasing cable channels, and numerous streaming services. Modern viewers no longer have to choose between 3 different television channels for their viewing pleasure, but can watch a bountiful number of different programs. Voluntary political inequality comes equality part comes into play because some viewers will only choose to watch entertainment programs rather than political ones. Pryor explained that this has hazy impact on our democracy. On the one hand, few fans have significantly increased access to information. News fans, sorry, my bad. On the other hand, people can opt out of politics entirely. Whether people are interested in politics has become those interested have become super motivational citizens and essentially make up for the uninterested is yet to be determined. It does not seem likely as how it started. Okay, good. Which let's go to you, Billy. Let's get another one. What is meant by voluntary political inequality? Unequal representation of citizens' interests due to erroneous information flow, creating encouraging preferences for what is important. Is it a real phenomenon? Yes, it's a real phenomenon. And how is it impacting democracy? Because I'm a Gen Xer and I have observed what it was like before the internet, during the implementation, and how the internet at full speed. What I see is the internet as a source of power that contradicts normal human power via availability to hide behind screens rather than facilitating natural human qualities because of the design features and use of the internet to facilitate news, entertainment, business, ultra everyday life. this power machine impacts democracy. How? Because more time is spent acclimating to internet life and all its potentials, including influences on a mass scale using concepts of profit, humanity, parenting, medicine, other kinds of relationships, and that is founded on the value of digital transmission globally. Okay, that's interesting. I'm not quite sure I follow the entirety of what you're getting, but I think. Okay. All right. So the reason I ask is this such a thing? That is, can you say, because you use the phrase there, the term, excuse me, the word inequality. This implies an imbalance. But if an imbalance is self-imposed, well, I suppose in the technical sense, it's still an imbalance. But is that something that we think of by way of inherent in the definition of imbalanced? That is something that needs to be corrected. Well, and I would argue, yes, we need to encourage everybody to become informed and move away from, movement of information that presents itself as news that's not news. And you see this. You see the phenomenon of the uninformed sometime in YouTube videos. It's literally stop the person on the street and ask them, what's the capital of Ghana? And they're like, or where is the country of Zambia or something? And they go, yeah, isn't that in Canada or something like that? You know what I'm talking about. Okay. What does the term gatekeeper mean? Who is the gate and how are they doing it? Okay. Is the power of the gatekeeper declining? Okay, this again is another one of those terms that you just got to know, like intrinsically, intuitively, okay, because you're going to see it a lot. Let's see. Nathaniel, gatekeeper simply refers to who controls what information that goes in and out of a given location. True. Okay. Is the power of the gatekeeper declining? It's hard to say. I would argue it's weakening. However, I think that COVID-19 is a great example of how, despite all the access the public has, gatekeeping is still effective and at work. And I think that's an excellent point. And what many, including those who produce platforms, who utilize platforms, whether it's YouTube or something, to produce presentations of information, many do not take into account is the capacity and the tendency of people to fall in line and voluntarily follow a single story thread. All right. And then in that respect, then they all become keepers of the same gate. Okay. So watch out for that when you're analyzing the media. Don't just assume because there's a multiplicity of different content providers on a particular platform. I'm thinking like YouTube, that is inherent, that is indicative of low threshold information and no gatekeepers. Not necessarily so. Okay. Lastly, what does the term muckraking mean? Again, this is one that you just have to, like, boom, I know that is. Muckraking is defined, let's see, John, defined as magazine journalists of the first decade of the 20th century who wrote factual accounts of widespread corruption of society by the forces of wealth. Yeah, that's true. But what, why? I mean, think about what that meant. Okay. So Richard, you say muckraking could be linked to a form of investigative journalists. Critics may say it's an underhanded way to get information about public figures or famous persons and reveal any wrongdoing or scandal to the public. But there's a place for this form of journalism in American society. Without this form of reporting, the American public would be unaware of wrongdoing by elected officials or civil servants. Muckraking brings information to the public so the public can make informed decisions. Okay, good. So in other words, as the phrase suggests, think about taking a rake and dragging it through the mud. It's digging up the dirt on somebody. Now, I'm going to leave you with this, okay, concerning our investigation into the lives of public figures. Public political figures, we should add, okay, because that's really what we're talking about here. The business of government is largely the business of hiring people, elections, to do a job for us. You know, these elected positions come with salaries that goes on largely unsupervised. That is, we are not in any meaningful way, even in the town that you live in, we are not in the office of the mayor, the councilman, that's a gender neutral term, our members of Congress at the state level, or certainly at the federal level. We are not privy to the meetings they have with lobbyists. We are not there with whomever it is they consult when they draft legislation. We are not in most of the committee meetings. There are some open hearings, but the majority of them are not. Most of what those whom we hire to govern us do, they do unsupervised. That is, we don't watch them. Okay, but they are working for us. Which begs the question, I'm going to leave you with this. Okay, maybe I'll have you write to this on the final exam. Are the personal lives of those who govern us important if we consider that the job of those who govern us is to govern us out of our sight? Is it relevant to ask the question, what does this person do when they think they're not being supervised and given what they do or don't do? What is our level of trust that they will or will not do the thing that we've hired them to do? That is, govern us in a honest and consistently moral way. And I'm not pointing to any particular politician in posing this question, current, or past. That becomes the crux of the question. Do those whom we hire to govern us that work far and away unsupervised, if we have evidence that they do not act in a way that is in accordance with our established laws and our established morals, when they believe no one is looking, what guarantee do we have that they will act in a way that we have instructed them, that is according to the laws and morals that we expect in governance, like tell the truth and believe it or not, within the frame of governance, for instance, policing, it's not a legal requirement to tell the truth. Police are allowed by law to misrepresent the facts in the course of their investigation and their questioning of a suspect. Now, when they get to court, no. But they can sit suspects down and say, yeah, we caught your accomplice, and he told us everything about it. In fact, he blamed you. So why don't you give us your side of the story and tell us what went on? They can say that when perhaps, in fact, that they haven't caught anybody and they haven't heard anything. That's merely a tactic to push a confession. All right, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is a different topic than we have today. But the allowance of not telling the truth is not necessarily illegal, but we would say that it's not moral. So is that relevant? What somebody does when nobody is watching, is that relevant? Is that a relevant question to address prior to hiring them to perform a job that is performed largely when nobody's watching? That is the question. All right, everybody. Good job. I will get to and through your film reviews this week. All right, and get them back to you, and then post the next link for the coming film review. Have a fantastic week. Get to the readings, get to the questions, and I will, as I always say, see you on Canvas. Bye-bye.